Today we're taking a look at the Lian Li Lancool 217 INF, the airflow focused mid-tower that builds on the original Lancool 217. Leo spent some time with the standard model earlier this year. This version keeps the same core layout and cooling philosophy, but adds those striking 170mm infinity mirror front fans that instantly change the look of the system. We'll be going over the design, the building experience, and the thermal performance to see how this new configuration holds up, and to see if the visual upgrade brings anything practical to the table. So let's get into it. So this is the Lian Li Lancool 217 INF. It's available to pre-order now in the UK. You can pick this up from Scan, priced at £107.99 for the black version and £112.99 for the white version. It's equipped with two large 170mm pre-installed intake fans behind a removable mesh to allow for strong airflow while reducing dust buildup. It features quick release side panels and integrated routing paths to simplify assembly and keep internal layouts clean. It accommodates up to a 360mm radiator in the top, as well as air coolers and vertical GPU mounting options for varied cooling setups, and adjustable and removable drive cages supporting both 2.5 and 3.5 inch storage. It's also equipped with integrated ARGB functionality for coordinated illumination across components. So to look at it, the form factor is a standard or a regular style mid-tower layout. It is, as you can see, quite low to the ground. It doesn't rely on bottom airflow because it's got some large side airflow vents, and obviously that front panel is a major change compared to the regular version, which was all mesh. In terms of dimensions, as I say, it is a regular size mid-tower. It's not compact, it's not large, it's somewhere in between the two, with dimensions of 482 by 238 by 503mm tall, and it's constructed of various materials including steel, plastic and tempered glass. So first let's have a look at some of the features and specifications of the case before we dive into the thermal performance and noise testing. As I said at the beginning, most of the panels are tool-free removal. So like the tempered glass side panel here, it just pushes off and it releases really quickly. It's held on with some quick release pins. You do get some of these plastic clips, some extra plastic clips included in the accessories pack. But as you can see, it's got a mild tint on that tempered glass on this black version. Right hand side panel removes in the same way. Again, it's held on just by quick release fittings. You can see them along the top, and there's one down the side here. You notice it's a plain steel side panel. There's no additional sound dampening material on there, but you will notice there is a large mesh vented section at the bottom of that panel. Top panel is also easily removable. Again, it just pushes off, quick release pins holding it in place. And you can see it is a large mesh vented panel. It's got ultrafine mesh on there. No additional dust filter, so the mesh will act as a filter if you're using that as an intake, but you are more likely to be using that as an exhaust. So it doesn't need a filter at all. There's a few buttons on the top here. So that's the power button and the two RGB control buttons, because the RGB is controlled with two individual buttons. So one button controls the fans, the other button controls the lighting on the infinity mirror front. So you can just cycle through the different types of lighting by pressing those buttons. Or if you want to synchronize the RGB lighting with the motherboard and control it via motherboard software, it's just a long press of the M2 button. Front I/O connectivity as default is fitted here on the side of the case. That is adjustable position wise. You can remove it from here and fit it up at the top of the case here. Quite easy to do. You have to remove the front panel. There's a couple of screws to remove. You need to thread the cables out, then it can be repositioned up at the top. A couple of screws hold it in place, and then it's just a case of feeding the cables back down. Very simple to swap that. It's handy if you've got it down here, if you've got the case placed on your desk and it's up near where you're working. But if you've got the case placed on the floor, it might be better to put the I/O panel at the top there. It'll be easier to access from the floor. On the front I/O, you've got two USB 3.0 Type A ports, a single USB 3.2 Type C port, and then a combined 3.5mm audio and microphone jack. This lower vented mesh panel is also easily removable. It's not tool free, but there is just a single thumb screw holding that place. Release the thumb screw and then it just slides backwards and removes. And again, you can see ultra-fine mesh on there. And there's obviously a reason for that, because there are some fan mounts on top of the power supply shroud here, so that will allow for airflow in. And also the power supply can be mounted in a couple of different ways, and it allows for air coming out of the power supply with that mesh panel on the side. In terms of cooling support, so because you've got these two massive 170mm fans at the front of the case, it doesn't technically support any other fan installation or radiator installation at the front, which is fine in terms of airflow, because those fans are going to give you some great airflow in, and you will be able to run them at a relatively low speed, so it should be quite low noise with these fans at the front. But if you do want to install additional fans and radiators, up at the top you can install either 3 120 or 240mm fans, or you can install up to a 360mm radiator. As you can see, that's what I've done in the test system. You could also, if you want to fit a 280 or a 240 radiator up there, there's a 140mm fan that comes pre-installed. It matches in terms of the aesthetics to the front fans, but potentially you could swap that out for a 120. You may even be able to squeeze in a 120 or a 140 radiator there if you'd like. There's also space for 3 additional 120mm fans on top of the power supply shroud. I'll check what difference that makes to thermal performance, adding some fans there later in testing. In terms of CPU air cooling, maximum size CPU air cooler you can fit inside the case is up to 180mm tall. The mesh covers on those 170mm front fans, they are removable. It's kind of a bayonet fitting. You twist them and then it just pulls out really easily to take them off for cleaning and maintenance purposes. Plus the whole front panel can also be removed, quick release, so it's really easy to get to those fans if you need to. This top radiator bracket, that's also removable. There's just a couple of screws in the side there, and then the whole thing pulls out. That makes it a little easier when it comes to installation. You can install the radiator to that mount on your bench and then put it back into the system. Not only that, it also allows for better access to the top of the motherboard. So if you, during the installation, if you get to connect something up to the top of the motherboard there, it's really easy to just lift that out of the way slightly, and it gives you improved access up there. In terms of motherboard support, it will support even the biggest server motherboards up to 330mm wide, plus eATX up to 280mm, regular ATX, micro ATX and mini ITX motherboards. It also supports back connect ATX and micro ATX. Maximum graphics card length is up to 380mm long. That's plenty of space for even some of the biggest graphics cards. Cable management, around this side you've got plenty of cutouts and grommets for passing cables through. Then obviously all the cutouts for the back connect ATX and micro ATX. There's also a graphics card anti-sag bracket integrated into the case. Really easy to use that. It's just a thumb screw on the back and it slides up and down, supports the graphics card really well. You can see this is a large RTX 5018. It's doing a good job at keeping that supported and looking nice and straight. Spin the case round and have a look at the rear. At the top you can see there's a 120 and 140mm fan mount there, cut out for the rear motherboard I/O. 7 PCIe slots below that. That PCIe slot bracket can be rotated to allow for vertical GPU mounting. Just remove the 4 screws, rotate the bracket, and then insert the 4 screws again, and that allows for vertical mounting. There's a vent down the side of that. The power supply mount there is blanked off. That's because you can have the power supply mounted in 2 different ways. You can either mount it in the standard or the regular way and connect the power cable at the back, or you can rotate the power supply and slide it in sideways and it fixes in place. There's a small extension lead to connect up. That does allow for easier access of the connections on the back of the power supply, so it does make it a little easier again when it comes to installation. If you need to connect up cables to the power supply later down the line, you don't want to go through all the hassle of disconnecting everything and pulling the power supply out. It does improve access there. It does make it a lot easier for adding cables to the modular power supply at a later date. So I like the idea of that. It's a good idea, but it does slightly restrict the maximum size of the power supply. So if you fit a power supply in the regular orientation with the power cable coming out of the back, you can install a power supply up to 220mm, but if you rotate the orientation and have it in sideways, that reduces the maximum power supply length to 180mm.
Black Friday is storming in with CyberPower PC and bringing the deals. Laptops, shocking prices. New keyboard, treat yourself. But here's the thunder. Buy any Black Friday PC and you can win your money back. Don't wait, ride the Black Friday storm of savings at CyberPower PC.
Then if we spin it round and look at this right hand compartment, there's quite a bit going on in here. You can see the cable management is really good. All the integrated cable management features are excellent. You don't need any additional zip ties really to make a decent and tidy looking job of cable management. At the back here you've got these 3 plastic clips. They're great for running up the EPS power cables, keeps them nice and neat, and it's a bit easier to clip those into those plastic clips rather than with Velcro straps. It can sometimes be a bit fiddly with the Velcro straps at that side. There's another central channel here for cable management, which is really for managing cables on back connect motherboards, but I found it good for routing the 24-pin cable to a regular motherboard. And then there's some more Velcro straps here and here for routing other cables like the fan cables, front panel connections and things like that. You can also see the grommets here for the 2 different motherboard types. The screw there for the GPU anti-sag bracket, and then all the cutouts for the back connect board, so along the top here, down the side and at the bottom. The micro ATX cutouts are a little blocked by these 2.5-inch drive bays, but you'll see why that is in a moment when I take a look at those. They can be rotated out of the way for back connect motherboards. You'll also notice that the default or the stock fans come connected up to a hub here, so the 270mm and the 140mm fan are all connected to that. That allows for the RGB and speed control of the fans, but there's a PWM cable that comes from that can be connected to the motherboard, so you can adjust the fan speed using your own motherboard software. And there's an ARGB sync, so a 5-volt ARGB cable that also comes from that and connects to the motherboard, so you can synchronize RGB lighting effects with motherboard software. Or it can be connected wirelessly to the L wireless controller that can be bought separately. Then the fan speed and the RGB lighting can be controlled wirelessly using Lian Li L-Connect 3 software. In terms of storage support, there is a lot going on. As you can see, you've got these 2 drive bays here for 2.5-inch drives. You can fit 1 on either of those, so 2 2.5-inch drives can fit behind the motherboard tray. But if you have a micro ATX back connect motherboard, you need to remove one of those drive bays and rotate one. It reduces the 2.5-inch drive just to 1 on the rear of the motherboard with back connect micro ATX. But you also have 2 additional drive bays down here. These have a plastic tray that slides out. On there you can fit either a 3.5-inch drive or a 2.5-inch drive. On the top of each of these bays you can also fit a 2.5-inch drive there. So potentially you could have 2 3.5-inch and 2 2.5-inch drives on there, or you could have 4 2.5-inch drives, potentially with another 2 2.5-inch drives here. But if you think you need even more 2.5-inch storage, there's space for 3 more 2.5-inch drives on top of the power supply shroud. And obviously you can see a little better now with the case turned round how much easier it is to connect up cables to the power supply with it in that rotated orientation. If you've got the power supply in the normal position, it'll be back here, really awkward to get to, especially with those drives in there. But you can remove those 2 drive bays from the floor also. There's a couple of screws underneath the case and then they just come out, and that will more or less give you unlimited space for power supply and cables underneath there. Accessories included with the case: you get the installation guide. That's really useful for checking how all these different modular panels are swapped around. You also get this plastic container with all the installation screws, grommets for the storage drives, and a couple of extra side panel clips in there. There's about 4 extra side panel clips in there. You get a few zip ties for cable management, but I didn't need to use any of these to make a tidy job of the cable management. And you also get a few extra brackets. So this one is for installing fans underneath the power supply shroud. This one is for use when you're doing a vertical GPU mount. And then this one is to replace the I/O panel if you remove that and install it on the top of the case. So that's the basic specs and the features of the case looked at. It's very similar, if not almost identical, to the original Lian Li Lancool 217, except for that visual change with the 170mm fans inset into the infinity mirror front panel. If you want to check out the specifications in more detail, we'll have a written review page up on KitGuruTech for the Lancool 217 INF. So now let's take a look at the thermal performance and noise test. We've run the usual combined Cinebench and 3D Mark Speedway stress test. You can also check out the testing methodology over at KitGuruTech. In terms of thermals, the Lancool 217 INF delivers solid results straight out of the box. In the default configuration, the CPU recorded a steady state temperature of 53 degrees C over ambient, while the GPU sat at 49 degrees C over ambient under load. Removing the glass side panel or swapping out the front and top mesh didn't significantly alter these results, showing that the case's airflow design is already very efficient as standard. The only notable improvement came from adding both bottom-mounted fans, which reduced GPU temperatures to 46 degrees C over ambient and lowered CPU temperatures slightly to 52 degrees C. This indicates that the extra intake helps the graphics card breathe more easily, improving airflow across the lower section of the case. Overall, the Lancool 217 INF maintains strong thermal performance, and with just a small tweak by adding bottom fans, it can cool high-end components even more efficiently. You can get a better sense of how the airflow changes by looking at the smoke tests. With no bottom fans installed, the GPU still draws air in through the lower side vent, so there's already a natural intake path. However, with the two bottom intake fans added, you can clearly see that airflow towards the GPU becomes much more direct and faster. This extra push of air helps feed the graphics card more efficiently, which ties in neatly with the small drop in GPU temperature we saw during the thermal test. Noise performance from the Lancool 217 INF stayed very consistent across all configurations, with system idle noise sitting at around 37 decibels regardless of setup. Under load, most configurations peaked at 50 decibels, showing that removing panels and mesh didn't noticeably alter the acoustic profile. The only setup that made a difference was the installation of bottom fans. This configuration not only lowered GPU temperatures slightly, but it also reduced load noise to 49 decibels, suggesting that the improved airflow helped the GPU maintain lower fan speeds. It's a small but welcome gain in both thermal and acoustic efficiency. In terms of the build experience, there really isn't much to say. Everything fits together as it should and as you'd expect. There's no issues with alignment of anything like the motherboard standoffs or the rear PCIe slots. You can, like I say, rotate that rear PCI slot and you can switch to vertical mounting. I like the fact that you can remove the top panel. That's great for if you forget to connect up some cables at the top of the motherboard. It improves access up there. It also makes it a little easier sometimes installing the radiator on the bench and moving the whole thing, including the bracket, and installing it into the case all in one go. There's plenty of space in the case to work, there's no issues, nothing really gets in your way while you're trying to install something else. In terms of cable management, that all works brilliantly. All the features built into the case, the straps, the channels, the points to tie down cables, they're all exactly where you want them, and there's more than enough. You don't need to use any additional zip ties or straps. Everything that's pre-installed into the case in terms of cable management works really well. It's really easy to manage cables and make it look like a neat and tidy professional setup. You've loads of options for storage, so you shouldn't have a problem if you need to use plenty of 2.5-inch drives or a couple of 3.5-inch drives or a combination of both. The only minor negative in the build process was the GPU anti-sag bracket that's built into the case. There's potential that that can touch one of the fans on the graphics card, but it's easy to resolve that. You just need to take it out, bend it downwards slightly, then put it back in, and it clears the fan, on this graphics card at least, no problem, so it's not much of an issue. So like Leo did with the original Lancool 217, I really like this case. The build quality is excellent, all the panels align well, all the quick release panels, they come off and go back on really easily. The 170mm fans up front and the default cooling scenario seems to work well. Adding fans to the floor can improve GPU temperatures slightly, but there's no real need to do that because it is a good high airflow case as it comes from the factory in the default configuration. And then, as I said at the beginning of this video, does the change of the visual offer anything practical? Well, in a way it does, because those 170mm fans provide a lot of airflow into the case. The only negative I can think of with that visual change in terms of practicality is the infinity mirror design. It's really bad for fingerprints. If you go anywhere near it with your fingers, it will leave a mark on there, so you're best staying away from it if you have OCD issues with fingerprints, or keep a cloth or a microfiber towel on hand to clean them off. But in terms of the case as a whole, it's good value, has great airflow and cooling, brilliant hardware support, and solid build quality that we've come to expect from Lian Li. So that's the Lian Li Lancool 217 INF. Let me know what you think of this case in the YouTube comment section. If you've enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to KitGuru if you've not already done so. If you enjoy what we do here at KitGuru and you want to help support us, you can head over to the store and pick up some of our merch, or you can even subscribe to our Patreon. We're also on TikTok, and if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.